city.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And I've got such a special place in my heart for the Camerata. I've been to lots of concerts at Bridgewater Hall and obviously spent loads of nights at one of the classical events, either in the mosh pit at Castlefield Bowl or something, but made loads of friends through the orchestra. So I'm really excited to be talking to you today. And we used to obviously share an office, didn't we, Bonded Warehouse, and shared the lift together a few times.
Many trips in the lift.
And we're obviously sitting here today in the amazing new home for the Camerata, Gorton Monastery, which we'll talk about. But it's quite honestly one of the most beautiful places we built this city in. So thank you for letting us come here today. So you're an adopted Manc. You're a Yorkshireman by birth, is that right?
I am.
So how did you get here?
So I grew up in the wilds of East Yorkshire where there were lots of cowpats, very remote. And my mum and dad were both musicians and music teachers, and they brought a violin home one day. So I had a bit of skill, had a bit of talent, ended up getting into the RNCM and studying with amazing Russian Ukrainian teacher called Lydia, who was from Odessa. I remember driving into Manchester and suddenly finding ourselves having left the cowpats of East Yorkshire behind, being on Curry Mile. We got a bit lost and we ended up there kind of looking around going, where on earth are we? So that was the physical journey from East Yorkshire to Manc. And that's when I became a Mancunian, that moment. I can remember it really clearly.
And do you still think you're a Manc now? Do you feel that you're a Manc now?
No, I think you need to be born here.
So could you see yourself living anywhere else now?
Maybe. This is home. This is definitely home. Maybe I am Manc. Maybe I'm more Manc than I think.
You're definitely an adopted one.
And I love the place. I love it.
And as soon as you arrived, did you kind of feel, I mean, the Curry Mile, I used to live on Moon Grove, which is just off. It was amazing.
Yeah,
in Russia. We were very lucky after university for a couple of years there.
Yeah.
Loved the buzz of that place. It was just, there was so much vibrancy and colours and lots going on.
I mean, I remember that moment really vividly, arriving and going, God, where the hell are we? But I don't know, there was something not familiar, but something comfortable to me about being there in something very different that was bustling and had lots of different people, from different cultures and backgrounds, really, obviously. And, obviously on Curry Mile, it's just like this incredible smell and food. And it just felt very exciting. And it's never stopped feeling exciting. It's like a city that's always got that hustle and bustle and maybe a sense of change about it. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
And so what happened after the Royal Northern College of Music? Did you stay in Manchester, or where did your career take you then?
So, I mean, the whole time during my time at the RNCM, and where I studied with an amazing Russian teacher, actually, who lived in Odessa and had come to England in the 70s, called Lydia Mulkovich. And she really knocked me into shape, if I'm honest. It was kind of a compassionate hand in a steel glove, might be the way to put it. But she was incredible and knocked me into shape, and I began working in various places, but one as a violinist and a viola player. The place that always stands out for me was Birmingham Opera Company, because I kind of happened on it, really. Somebody just saw me one day and said, do you play the violin and the viola? And I said, I do. And they said, you're booked. Which was a bit happen chance, I suppose. But Sir Graham Vick, who sadly died last year, was the artistic director there for many years. And he kind of moved it from being a company that toured in traditional venues in a traditional way and said, actually, no, I want this to be part of and reflect society in the most visceral way it can. And so he really changed the company, literally turned it around to face a different way, where we were in found spaces before anyone called them found spaces, where we were working with people who didn't have the opportunity, had real disadvantage, before people were really doing that. And so I got this incredible experience of, sometimes being in an ice rink, up a crane, in a car park, all of these things. But the quality of what, of the artists around us and the experience was very, very high. And so that really shaped a lot for me about what what I wanted to do, the difference I wanted to make, and the people that I wanted to do it with, I suppose. So I mean that was a really formative experience, and and obviously being in Manchester where there are amazing orchestras and ensembles. Now the BBC, the Halle, the Manchester Collective, Safa's amazing. Being around all of that kind of influences you. So yeah, that was my journey into being a musician, and and I was okay. I was a good musician, I suppose, to a degree. But the whole while along, I'd also wanted to help create projects or ideas and make them happen, not from a playing point of view, to organise things. And so I worked in a few festivals and helped create those and run those, and that was really interesting. And then set up a company called Blue Frog with a dear friend of mine, Fiona, and we ran the kind of projects that I suppose I just described, where a lot of it in Lancashire. And then this job came up, a few years into that, and I've been here since.
So it was 16 years ago.
It was 16 years ago. Oof,
and
let's mumble that was 16 years ago. Yeah.
And you're celebrating the 50th birthday this year.
Jointly with Camerata, bizarrely. Yeah.
Oh
so
my gosh,
Camerata is 50 and I'm 50.
Wow,
so
that's meant to be.
But maybe it was.
Yeah.
I didn't quite clock it, but yeah, maybe it is. But it's an interesting one for Camerata, the 50th, because, particularly over the last 2 years, we've really gone back to ask that question: why do we exist? What we're actually here for? And really, it's about music as a tool for positive change, rather than necessarily music for us to play and enjoy. Of course, it's for us and we enjoy it, but we think if it's not affecting some positive change, and those can be very, very small changes that are insular, or there can be much bigger changes that are external facing to our audiences and communities, and both are important in balance. And so over the last 2 years we've I guess focused down on what we're about and the direction we want to take. And for us, it's all about the future. It's about laying down foundations, with new composers, new communities that we can make a difference in the future, and new audiences, of course. A project like Hacienda Classical or something, it's grown huge audiences. And I'm sure it will continue to do so because it's a brilliant show, Yeah, so I mean, we don't want to not acknowledge the past because that's how you get to where you are.
Yeah.
But for us, it's very definitely about looking forwards with that context.
And so, what was the Camerata like when you found it? When you made it here, kind of 16 years ago? Was it very different then?
It was different, but I was really lucky because the whole of Camerata and everybody involved in it, it's one big collaborative effort. And I was incredibly lucky to come at a time when Douglas Boyd had been here, a great friend and an amazing artist, and had helped build the orchestra, get them to the proms and recording regularly and playing in the Bridgewater Hall, and the orchestra, was sounding absolutely fantastic. And so, I was very lucky that it was in that shape when I came, and financially it was very stable. So we've just continued to build on that. And of course, as things evolve, some people go, some people arrive, and things evolve and develop. And, but from that base. So I thank those people very, very much for getting to that point, because we couldn't have got here without that.
It was interesting when you talk about the people that you're working with. We were saying before, when we arrived at the space we're in here, there was a circle of chairs, and that was your board meeting circle. At the beginning of every board meeting, one of your board members plays a piece.
Yeah,
I love that.
One of the orchestra does. Yeah, I mean, it sounds a bit like
one of the orchestra, not one of the board members.
Definitely
okay,
not. As one of the board members said, you don't want us playing. We said no, we don't. We don't. It sounds a bit like the magic circle. It was a nice way to start that meeting, and to hear actually Rachel, our principal oboe, talk about her now 20 years in the orchestra, and just reflect. What she did reflect was the value of that variety of work that we do. So all the way from, Afro Deutsch, it's an amazing artist we've just begun working with in Coventry on Sunday, right through to Mozart, recording all the Mozart piano concertos in Stoller Hall. And it's that variety and depth which, honestly, in quite a traditional world that likes to be able to put things in a box and define it, we don't fit in that box. And that has been a struggle because, I think some people in our sector, maybe some of our audiences go, oh, what do you mean you're doing Afro-Deutsch? Have you lost it? What's going on? But actually for us, that is about the richness of the society that we're in, and it's about an amazing artist. It's just not one actually that writes music or can read music. But we don't care about that because I think for us all, and as Rachel also reflected, it's got to be about the emotional connection that music can make, and focusing really, really hard on that. And that's something I also learned, and that I feel really strongly about working with Graham at Birmingham Opera, because it was, removing what can sometimes be the restrictions of concert halls and the behaviours that some people have in them, which can be, they can be a bit judgmental. Did you clap at the wrong time? Well, we don't really care if you clap. It's because you enjoyed it, and that's what you're there for, right?
Is that true? Is that what people think now? I mean, that was always a thing. It was the person who clapped in the wrong place.
Yeah, sadly, somebody told me that story about 4 months ago. Said, I went to a concert. Concert was really great, but I clapped because I enjoyed it, and somebody turned around and tutted at me.
I know, it's so off-putting.
It is,
Yeah.
but I guess, you just got to go, well, maybe for that person who tutted at you, it interrupted their moment. But I think not being in traditional concert halls, which are amazing, and we still play in them, we have a different experience where in a building like this where there's a greater sense of yourself and what you're experiencing rather than necessarily the building.
Yeah,
somehow.
because I think it's quite exclusive, isn't it? You say something classical music, and it's like I grew up in a family of jazz musicians, and it was amazing. And classical, actually, it was a musical family, but a lot of our friends at school, they're like, what do you mean you like jazz and what you like classical music? But if you can put another word to it, you can bring it out and put it into different environments, you can engage more people that perhaps it wouldn't appeal to with that kind of traditional label.
Yeah, it's an interesting word, classical. We don't use it really much anymore because, if you just looked at it in its purest sense, what does that mean? Well, it refers to a period of time about 300 years ago. So that's not us because we're not 300 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think one of the phrases we use is great music is great music. And if great music is in your ears, happens to be hip hop or grime, that's fine. There can't be any judgment about that. I think where it goes wrong is where people in either world, be it grime, looking at classical, go, oh, that's classical, or the other way around, that's where it doesn't work. I think having the respect for different types of music, why you love them, what's good about them, how it makes you feel, how it connects people, in my opinion, that's what's important. So, and part of our journey has been about, I suppose, breaking down some of those barriers. That was one of the great things about, the Mozart project we're doing, which is, with Gabor, our wonderful music director, he talks about music as spiritual medicine. And honestly, he could be in a cowshed or Carnegie Hall and you wouldn't get anything different. You would get absolutely the purest form of this amazing artist. I think that's quite unusual. But vice versa, with a project like Hacienda, that comes with that amazing history and euphoria of that time and that place, to kind of mix that with classical and challenge those boundaries a bit, that's been an interesting journey as well.
It's interesting because I didn't know this, but just tell us about the name, what Camerata means, because it seems to me it's so in keeping with what Manchester is all about.
It is really. So the word Camerata comes from the Florentine Camerata, who existed in the, 1660s, long time ago. But basically, it's a group of people for quite a short space of time, actually, like 10 years in Florence, who came together to discuss education, the arts, society. And it was, really prominent figures, poets, scientists. Galileo was part of it, for instance. And so it really was a melting pot of people who wanted to share ideas and to collaborate and to think about, perhaps think about new ways of doing things. And so I think many years ago, that was a very, very well chosen name, and one that, we really keep in the back of our minds, whether we're in this building with the Dell Care Home or, we're in Beijing on tour with Mozart, whatever it is you really try and keep that in mind, because that's the spirit that in the orchestra makes the orchestra sound as good as it does. And that's the spirit that means, we can connect really, really well with kids at Onside or wherever, wherever we're at. So it's a really important thing, that.
So you mentioned Onside there. So we're obviously in the middle of Gorton, and we're in a world-class building here, with a world-class orchestra. What was the decision about bringing it here? Because it's not in this kind. You're not surrounded necessarily by people who would totally get the Camerata. So has there been a big impact? Have you been able to take the Camerata into the immediate community?
Gosh, there's a lot there. So have we made an impact? It's far too early to tell, because I think an impact for me is something systemically long term that's changed. Are we doing? Have we got some activities with people? Yes, we have, because it wasn't about moving to this building. It was about moving to this area. I mean, it happened to be we were kind of homeless. We didn't have a roof over our head, and there'd been a long relationship with the monastery anyway, for 15, 16, 20 years even. And so, at that time, we got a roof over our head. But we always said when we moved here, it has to be about the difference we can make for people, not just being in this building. And so, of course, we spoke to amazing Adam Farrakher at Onside, and I don't know, just I asked him about his journey. It really was, for 6 months, it was about talking to people and listening to what their journey to here had been. Could they see any value in us being here? Because if they said no, we'd have probably done one. We might not be here now, but that's not been the case.
So when you say you spoke to people in the community, who did you engage with then to ask them that question, if they wanted you here or not?
That's a really good question, because when you do that, you're already kind of selecting a group of people, I suppose. But we just started with people we knew. We spoke to a range of people. So Afzal Khan, the local MP, who we've become really friendly with, actually, and it's a really great relationship where he's obviously very supportive, but he's challenging as well, which I think is important. And Lutfer Rahman, the exec member for Leisure and the deputy leader of the City Council, who's been hugely supportive of culture in general, but really supportive of our move here. And then just, as many people nearby that we can do. St. Peter's, the obviously Hideout and all the colleagues there. Oasis, I mean, that's an incredible project, an incredible centre. Other schools, the GPs, and as we've established some activity here, just to talk to people who come off the street, the people, the residents, and find out what their story is, what they think of the area that they live in, what they think of this amazing building, and what they need, what they want the area to be in, and then finally to say, could we fit in some way? What would you imagine us doing? And of course, we've got suggestions, we've got ideas, but we don't want to bring that first. We want to hear what people really want, because this isn't a light move for us. This is home. So we have to figure out where we fit in, and so we're slowly doing that. But it's been really interesting doing that, because there's such an enormous pride, rightly so, in this area, its history, and what it is now. So, and for the future, which is really great.
And when you were talking to some of those individuals or those groups, what did they say they wanted?
I think what they want is, a large part of it is they want events in here. They want to come to something in this building. That's a big bit of it, because people are very, very proud of this building. But not everyone walks through the door. It's an awe-inspiring place, and that can work both ways. And so what we heard was, we don't always go in, but what we'd love to do is to come in and hear something. And then, that's from the kind of orchestra performance point of view. And so, for instance, the Messiah, it's going to be a regular slot. We did it in December to test it out, and it was rammed to high heaven, and people left crying. So, well, that probably works. But there's other more edgy stuff like the electroacoustic mashup that we do. Equally, that just sold out in a flash, and so that tells us people really want that, and they had a great time. And on the other side of our work, the community work, particularly the dementia music therapy work, that again, we had 3 months of that, which was profoundly moving, was kind of packed every time. We had to stop because the funding stopped and people were still knocking on the door. So, I think that also works. But perhaps one of the most moving things for me was working with Onside, a very short project to work with some of the kids who hadn't sung in a choir, and Adam said, I really want to get them singing. And they wrote and performed their own song at the AMC, the gospel festive happening that we do at Albert Hall, in front of like 900 people. And, that was...
Yeah.
It was an amazing moment because none of us knew whether they could write it, whether they wanted to do it, or whether they could deliver it in a show, and they did it all. So it was really quite something that, so when you use the word impact, that was an incredible outcome that they managed to do that at that level of quality. But I'd like to think that's something that will never leave them, and therefore it probably will be an impact.
Yeah.
But who knows? Early days.
But creating legacy just in that, isn't it? In terms of just, and also, did you perform that in the Albert Hall?
Yeah, that's a regular for us. So we've worked for many years as a partner with AMC Gospel, who are, I could come up with tons of words. They're amazing, and you only need to hear a few seconds, and it just takes you to a different place. It's very, very moving because it's so emotional. And those voices are incredibly powerful. And that's been a really interesting relationship, because to learn from a completely different culture and musical style, a more direct way of communicating is probably the thing we've learned from them. And I think they'd say the same of us, So it was great to bring the kids from Hideout to work with AMC and for them to see them perform as well.
I've been to that. That's just an incredible, that's when Christmas starts, isn't it? But it's bringing young people who don't perhaps feel that they have access to those beautiful buildings. Obviously Albert Hall is another incredibly stunning building, isn't it? But by that opportunity with music, helping them to kind of literally get onto a stage or a platform, it's it's life-changing to some degree, isn't it? It's a first in many cases.
It is. And that, what you just said in many ways forms part of our vision for the future. We have a formed plan about artistic and social impact that we want to make in Greater Manchester. And a large part of that is changing opportunities.
Yeah.
For the next 3 years, we want to reach 1 million people to start that process. And that will be about making sure that every person who has dementia in Greater Manchester and every young person gets access to great music making, in whatever way works for them. It's not about us playing to people in a fixed venue,
yes.
But really listening and understanding what that is and bringing that change. And in this kind of 50th year, that's one of the big things that we want to come out of this, is that we do have a fantastic start to reaching that 1 million people over the next 3 years. But really listening and working with people to find out what works for them, rather than just taking what we do.
Definitely.
And that in itself makes us more accessible.
Yeah.
You speak in the same language. Well, if it's hip hop like it is at St. Peter's, fine, it's hip hop. That's great.
Yeah.
We're going to learn a lot from that. And then you've instantly made yourself more accessible, I guess. So.
We're doing some work with City Council with Bev and Joanne. There's an initiative called Our Year. So just thinking as we're talking now, that'd be an amazing opportunity to get you involved in that.
Yeah, do you know, we were just talking to some of Bev and Joanne's colleagues in the culture department about that last week.
Amazing.
So watch that space.
Oh, absolutely.
I hope we'll be involved.
And then you did something, it always makes me laugh, because you did something a few years ago. I think it was with Allied London. It's like a scratch orchestra for a Christmas concert, and you could apply to be in it, and I applied. I blew the dust off my flute. No, I think my application got lost in the post.
No.
I was gutted. I thought I wasn't good enough. We didn't have to send anything in. There's no audition. But I love that idea. I mean, we did something in in Bury at the Rock, when we launched the Rock Shopping Centre, Roland Dransfield a job for a client, and we got the scratch choir together of people in the community, and we did One Day Like This, and they practiced, so people who had never really sung before. And some of the elbow band came, actually without even knowing. We didn't know they were going to come, they came. But loads of the people who did that went on then to carry on singing, and they it gave them the confidence back, and it's just such a magical thing to be involved with.
Yeah, I think the thing about singing, as well as anyone can do it, and not everyone has the opportunity or has the time or money to have lessons and, play an instrument, I guess. That's something that we're thinking a lot about here, because obviously it's a great place for singing, hence something like the Messiah and AMC Gospel, but I think the thing is, everyone should have access to great music making. It's almost everyone's right in a city like Manchester, that the line underneath is it famous for music, and football probably, so I think I'm glad that Bev and Joanna, focusing on this our year, isn't it? The whole plan. Be interesting to see what comes out of it. But the thing at St John's with Allied London, the choir there, the orchestra was a really interesting story, because there was somebody who worked with an Allied who wanted to set an orchestra up and write a piece, and it found it a bit difficult at first, and so we helped and formed this orchestra. And I'm really sorry we missed your CV.
I can't believe it. I was absolutely devastated.
So rude, isn't it? Awful.
I never got over that.
Dissed.
But my party pieces, I can play pretty much any pop song that you asked me to on my flute without any music. Yeah.
Okay.
And my favourite is Fairy Tale of New York. I don't know. I might have to do more practicing. No, I've actually put that out there. But one year at Bonded Warehouse, we could all play a musical instrument badly, but we could all play something. And we actually had a Christmas concert of our own in Bonded, and and we did Fairy Tale of New York then. So I don't think you're in the building then.
I don't think we were. So my request then is, and this would be from my boy Ted probably, and Nell, my daughter, it'd be Mr. Brightside.
Oh, I can do Mr. Brightside.
Can you? Really?
I've seen The Killers. I have seen The Killers quite a lot of times, and that's one of my favourite songs to play. Okay. So we'll work on it.
Practice.
So I mean, and also we've just been talking there about so many different people and different community groups and politicians and businesses. And that just really shows, doesn't it, about the collaboration that Manchester's famous for. And I just think it's unparalleled. I've never seen this anywhere else. But it does take an army, doesn't it? We have that army in Manchester, and that just shows how much, for example, music or culture touches so many different parts of our Greater Manchester community. Yeah,
it really does. But people who are directly in that culture also really appreciate and support it. So, I'm really lucky. I've got friends and colleagues, Dave Moutry at home, who's amazing, appreciates and sees so much art and culture and sees its impact, and colleagues at MIF, obviously in the other music ensembles, but also in places like the university. Creative Manchester's a sort of a part of the university, and that's very important to us because we do a lot of work and research with them. So it is kind of imbued. It's just like runs like a golden thread through everyone, really. It's got its challenges as well, because when you've got a lot of ambition, and the city does, and we all do, well, there comes a cost with that, because world class doesn't cost nothing. So there are always challenges with that, but I think that's made a lot easier because everyone broadly wants the same thing long term, which is great. It does make it unusual, and colleagues in London reflect that that's unusual about Manchester, and internationally. That's unusual.
And how does it feel, because obviously Camerata travels worldwide, how does it feel kind of taking that Manchester DNA across the world? I mean, does it feel that is there a responsibility in some way?
Yeah, always. It's a heavy name, right, isn't it? It's Manchester, so if we go somewhere, it's got to be really good. But not just good, it's got to be good in a Mancunian way. It has to have that distinctive edge, and we have to work hard to find that. So when we went on tour to China, or we've got other tours lined up, whenever we go, we always think, right, what else can we bring that's Mancunian? So it might be a piece that one of the students at Cheetham's or the RNCM has written something that's unusual, or it might be something like the Music in Mind program, which is very Manchester and is world class, and so we might offer that. But and also we try to make those civic connections. So when we're on tour in China, of course, we're trying to meet some of the dignitaries there, and I don't know, bring something of Manchester. Bring a bee, at least.
But it's interesting, isn't it, that we have a perception of a certain genre of music in Manchester. And when I had I always say this, Dr. Kirsty Fairclough.
She wouldn't mind, by the way.
Kirsty
wouldn't mind,
I've said
sure.
it several times. I've changed her name. But she was saying that, with the jazz festival, that, you don't automatically think of that rich history of jazz in Manchester. So we tend to think of it as being Manchester in the 80s and the hacienda. It drives my son mad. He goes, "That's not what music's about, Mum," in Manchester. So it's really encouraging to see so many opportunities to push and educate people with other types of music and remember that musical heritage that we've got here.
It is, and I think it's a really good point that your son makes, because you might love the music of the Manchester period, or you might hate it, whatever. Actually, for those people, it's great music, and it's still great music. But we've got to think about what comes next and why and what it's going to do, and allow artists, in our orchestra, not in our orchestra, allow artists to have as much of a voice as they can and allow their ideas to flourish, because that's why Manchester succeeded, So, and that happens in lots of ways. I do feel sometimes that, and I'm going to use that word I said we don't use much, which is classical, but the classical music offering, as opposed to the indie rock, pop, whatever, it sometimes gets a little bit lost in Manchester. I think I'd love to see it continue to be appreciated more, and for that to really develop, and for people to go to concerts, to really try things out that they might not otherwise, because that's a very, very important part of our heritage. And the Halle's an incredible orchestra. It's been going for 150 years. That's an amazing achievement. If they weren't there, we wouldn't be here. There's so many other things wouldn't happen. So it's almost looking at the spider's web and going, we need to look after every little bit of this to make sure that the whole kind of continues. I do think, particularly, at the moment, particularly after COVID, there's a lot of not just young artists, actually, mid-career artists as well. We sometimes forget about that need support, in their new creative ideas, things they want to do in the community, or just, continuing with their career. Because it's very, very hard, artists, musicians, they don't earn much. We can all see, the price of a coffee going up and houses and all those sorts of things. And so it's worth just really being mindful of that and making sure we support those people.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
So, talking about the pandemic, performers, artists, the whole creative industry is probably hurt more than most. And the other thing I think about that time is that when we've been through crises in Manchester, every single time we've had a crisis, we've always had music. And we've always been able to come together, and that's taken some of the pain away, hasn't it? If you think about the concert, for example, after the arena attack, or is that coming together as a community? So how was it for you at that time, and what did you do to keep your teams together and put your music out there?
You just have to play. You just have to do what you do. Yeah, and just as you're saying that, my head went to standing in the field at Glastonbury watching Rowetta in her incredible bee outfit, where we opened Glastonbury that year. But that was a real moment. She sang "We Got the Love," and it was after the bomb, and it was quite. It was sorry. It was really emotional, and it was quite a profound moment to have the opportunity to do that, actually. But during COVID, the other thing we've got to remember, and it's back to the artists, we've got an amazing pool of freelance artists. Those are people who choose not necessarily to have one job, to be freelance, to follow their vocation, to follow their way of doing that. And they're incredible people, number one. but they're incredible musicians who want to give back in a variety of different ways. And we're very, very fortunate here with that. But during COVID, as a freelance orchestra, because our musicians are not contracted, so there's no furlough for them.
No.
And it was really, really, really hard. Some of them had teaching jobs that helped them keep going. We had great support from the Arts Council and from our patrons and donors, who, we still need. We need to grow that in the future. And we managed to, put some projects together, like one in this building, in fact, with AMC. And so those were important points. But they didn't pay the bill. They were driving for Amazon. They were doing all sorts of other things. And, I think there'll be a legacy from that the pace and the pressure of working like that, some people won't come back. Right. Because, it's like an athlete. It really is like an athlete playing an instrument at that level. You have to be in constant daily training. That's before you go to work. And when you go to work, very often there's a lot of pressure, there's not much time, and it's got to be really good. So if you imagine all of that shoved into a 3-hour session where, or the hour that we got to warm up on the stage at Glastonbury, well, it's pretty damn tough, actually. But they're an incredible and positive and plucky lot, the freelancers that we have up here. So I'm really grateful to, the people, and there's some significant trusts and foundations, etc. The Savannah Trust, for instance, who've really supported that group of people. Because in a way, that's the lifeblood that can, go with the flow, shift, change, grow, do different things. I've lost the question, but I
mean, it's interesting because my daughter's she's just graduated 6 months ago from the Academy of Contemporary Music in Guildford, and she's a singer and she's done singing and production. Wow. But she had pretty much, she started university and then 6 months later had to bring her home. And then for 18 months, and they never went into a studio. They were doing songwriting on Zoom calls, horrendous, in like breakout rooms with people you don't know. And she said to me that the pressure to be creative, and I think I've spoken to other creative people, that there was, you must be even more creative now because it's a lockdown, you've got time. And in actual fact, the reality is as well, besides those pressures, it's life that makes you creative. It's those things that you see when you see each other.
People,
I mean, Lewis Capaldi cancelled his tour, and he thought he was going to lock himself down in a mansion, didn't he? And he couldn't produce. So it's that massive pressure that we also put on creatives in times of, in challenging times. We'll just go and create, and it doesn't work like that, does it?
It really doesn't. I mean, we have this conversation in our team sometimes. When we really need an idea for a creative idea for a particular funder or a project or whatever, and my colleague James, quite rightly, he's brilliant. He'll just say, look, it's a creative idea. I can't sit down on a Wednesday at 10 o'clock and go, right, now's my time to have the creative. It doesn't work like that, and so it does need support. It needs the right environment for musicians, for actors, for all of these people. You can't do it on demand. And actually, as much as we can do virtually and on Zoom, and there's loads that we can, it's great. The whole point is the human interaction and seeing, hearing, feeling that emotional response and connection. You can't really get that on a Zoom call virtually. It's very, very difficult. Lots of things you can, but that bit you can't. And that's where the next creative impulse or idea comes from very often. So, that's another reason why musicians and artists not having the outlet of sitting in front of and making that connection with an audience, it's almost like being mute. Totally. You're suddenly not able to communicate and do the thing that you do. It's kind of trapped inside. So, then to be hurled back into it right now, it's back on, you're, back up to the pace, really high standards. Some people are going, I need a build up. I can't just click back in. I think it's tough.
You said just that image of Rowetta at Glastonbury. I spoke to Rowetta for We Built the City not long after the pandemic. It might have even been in one of the other lockdowns, probably was. And I felt emotional when he told that story then, because she said that it was like the meaning of her life was over, because she got so much love from standing in front of a group of people and sharing her talent and sharing her art, that it almost felt that she totally lost her identity in that time. And that's so hard, because that is who you are, it's how you show up, and suddenly that's taken away from you.
Yeah, I mean, I love Roata. I just think she's an amazing artist, and there's something about her voice. I mean, she's a great person to talk about on this subject, isn't it? Because for whatever reason it is, in her voice, you almost can see her heart. You can almost see the suffering, the joy, all those things that's in people's emotion. It's almost like a tingle in the air that you could almost reach out and touch. It's so visceral with her, I think. Lots of other artists as well. So I think, for people like that, I can imagine it's like that, having that outlet is who you are, for good, for bad, for whatever. And, that's really difficult. What I do hope is that as we come out of COVID, how long have we been saying that?
I think
we're coming
out.
We're going back in. I don't know. Whatever we are, anyway, where we're at right now, that we can value people like that, value freelancers, go to shows, buy tickets, be there really as an audience member. Just like give yourself a look at them. Just look at them, give yourself and go for it, because actually there's no shortage of great artists, and there's certainly no shortage of people who need what Gabor would say is spiritual medicine. We were all on our doorsteps on Thursday nights clapping for the carers every night. Where are we now? What are we doing to support those carers in care homes, in health settings now? Because they also need our support still. I'm kind of saying that because we work a lot in the care sector with the dementia program that we've got. And when you look at how much is invested in artists, well, it's it's good, but it's not enough. It's not much. When you look at how much is invested in carers, it's pitiful. And so, I think I hope those are just two things I hope people reflect on, because if we don't have music around us, well, what will happen in the next pandemic? Because there probably will be one. And if we don't have great carers, well, what will happen to us when we need care, or our loved ones?
I think the work that you did in the pandemic in terms of the United We Stream, and that was amazing. That we watched that in our kitchen, and it was incredible. And to see all the musicians just in their bedrooms or wherever, it was amazing.
Yeah, it was. It was amazing that, and
was that hard to pull together?
It was incredibly hard to pull together, because nobody had done it really. What am I doing standing in my spare bedroom blowing a tune when I should be on a stage in Glastonbury? It was just, that was weird individually, but I guess behind all of that there are two amazing people. There's Fletch and of course Hooky, who's been behind that whole thing and having their belief that it could happen and we could do it and we could make it great, and that focus on making it the great experience we all know it's been, that just got everyone revved up. They just went, yeah, we can do it. It's fine. And in that psychology, that upwards positive psychology, it's like, why would it not work? And of course, there were all sorts of difficult things to pull together, and was it synced and did it look this, that, and the other? But it was great, And then we'd done something virtually which really worked, and it reached like millions of people as well.
Yeah, and really that's one of the things that it did, by being able to stream that kind of stuff. It did get to such a probably different, wider audience, but a different audience.
Yeah.
We had the whole of our family were around watching that, and it was amazing. Although my son's going, this is not what Manchester's about. That ain't Manchester stuff, but it does. It was brilliant. I remember it being a really joyful night. Actually,
it was good, wasn't it?
It was fantastic. What would you say? I mean, we talk about values. Roland Dransfield, and our values now are our brand, and they are so important to what we do. What would you say the values are with the Camerata, and kind of how do you want people to feel what your role is in the world as music and in the community?
It's to connect with people, it's collaborative, and it's about courage. It's really those three things. Obviously through music, But also, in terms of values, those are quite, those are firm, but I think it's the way you apply them as well, isn't it? And we have this thing in our team at the moment it's the way we work. It's about consulting, which really means listening, but deep listening, actually listening and watching to find ways to collaborate that can create long-term impact. So the consult, collaborate and create kind of vibe is that. I think that's what works. And, that's the way the orchestra work. They're constantly listening to each other when they play because they have to. And, but it's, it is in an unusually collaborative way where they generally want to upwardsly support their colleagues around them. And that's why we do create something that's very, very special. It's also why they've got the kind of, resilience, strength, all those sorts of words, as opposed to try different things, because if it goes wrong, there's nobody judging you. If it goes wrong, oh, well, there you go. We tried something and it didn't work. There's something to learn from and on.
I really feel that the Camerata is not precious in terms of its music. Obviously, the music is wonderful, but it feels that you're very aware of... I really feel that the Camerata is not precious in terms of its music. Obviously, the music is wonderful, but it feels that you're very aware of I suppose the importance of the music and what the music can do and the platform that you have in terms of taking that out and that wider impact piece. It feels that you're almost like a charity in some way, in terms of the work that you do with people possibly less fortunate or vulnerable people, like you talked about the dementia work.
Yeah, look, we are a charity and a limited company.
Yeah.
So, we are, and we take, that's in our memorandum of articles and association, that's who we are, that's how we operate, it's how we roll, but we take it really seriously. So, the community work is, as I said before, that's not about us playing music too.
Yeah.
It absolutely starts with listening. What is the need? What does a school need? What does a care home need? And that's been one of the really joyful things about the Music in Mind programme, is that it listened and observed that need 10 years ago when we met Professor John Keedy at the university, John's incredible. He was a dementia nurse in the 80s and he's now really highly respected academic who's written a lot about dementia and knows a huge amount about it. But it was interesting because he brought us the idea of what would happen if we examined that moment when music makes the difference to somebody who lives with dementia. What would happen? What's the program that you could do, Camerata, that would explore it? And what's the research that we would do that would pick that apart and understand it? 10 years on, we've got PhD under our belt, another one starting, some research with carers just around the corner starting, a nursing placement, and a new company. We formed a new company with the university to find digital ways that we could apply some of that, so that, again, that's the other side of that is we've only been able to do that because we've got amazing musicians. They're very, very high quality, not just in terms of their playing, but their interactions as humans and their creative ideas. So several of them and, past and current colleagues of mine have helped develop that whole programme. But that aims now to spread right over Greater Manchester. Quite excited about that, as you can hear.
Yeah, exactly. And how important do you think it is, has Manchester been to the Camerata in terms of what it stands for and its values? Could it have done what it's done anywhere else, do you think?
Do I don't want to answer that, because the other thing that I think Manchester does is pat itself on the back a bit about that. And I think that can lead to complacency, and it's not good, because yes, of course we're great, but are we as great as we think we are? Probably not, because we do punch above our weight, which is a great thing. But equally, when you're busy going, we punch above our weight, well, what did you miss? What could have been better? What could be supported better? So maybe it couldn't have happened anywhere else, but we haven't tested that out, so we don't know. What we do know is that, that very Mancunian spirit, that collectiveness. There's a fantastic report, a Greater Manchester Inequalities Commission report, and I think it's Kate Pickett who's the chair of that, who talks about, of course, lots of disadvantage and stuff that shouldn't be happening and that isn't great in our society, but that it's the collective spirit that'll overcome that. And I think that's definitely an unusual thing for Manchester. So could you have that collective spirit anywhere else? Maybe not quite in the way we do here.
Yeah, good answer. It's interesting though, Vikash Shah, who was on the podcast, he has a business, isn't he? He's a philanthropist and an author, you know, Vikash.
I know Vikash, yeah.
And he said, you know, we can you can be in an echo chamber if you're not careful. And how we view ourselves, if you go onto a world stage, there is so much exciting work being done around the globe. And obviously you see that because you are taking Manchester out there, and you can make those comparisons, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, you only need to look at a city like Budapest. And that's really interesting because, you know, there, a classical concert will be put on, it'll be sold out in a day.
Right.
Here, you're grinding away to get to 50% on the day. That's the reality. You know, so are we world class? Are we doing the very best that we can if we compare ourselves with Budapest? No, nowhere near, actually. You know, and of course you can pick apart all the reasons for that. What is it? Is it because they're better funded? Well, they probably are, but is it only that? No, it's not. It's a cultural thing. It's where, you know, probably classical music has always been in schools, has always been part of the culture and the system there. And therefore it's just something that people do and they love it. And that's great. You know, so can it just be something that every Mancunian just does? Yeah, it should be. Yeah. That could be what good looks like.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because I've just been mentoring in a school in Salford. So I had a little sister and I was a big sister. And I don't think she learnt anything off me, but I learnt plenty off her, to be honest.
Say thank you.
Yeah, sadly. But music doesn't seem to be a big thing. Like when I was at school, you know, you all had to go, there was always instruments, you had to go and fight, and who didn't get to the front of the queue got the drumsticks, whatever. So, but there was the opportunity for us all in Salford to play musical instrument. I mean, is that the same now? Are we not?
No.
So there's a real issue in terms of bringing them through.
This is a huge issue and it's like a lot of things in recent history where, you know, really important things that will have an impact just go like that. They go mute because it's get covered under a load of other news. You know, music in schools, it's being wound down. Music, you know, the funding for music in higher education has been halved. So what's going to happen? Do we have half of Peter Hook in 40 years? Do we have half of Rowetta? We'll be lucky if we do. You know, so we really everybody needs, you know, to kind of give themselves a call to action. It's like, if we care about that, you have to do something about it now, because you don't grow, you know, a great flautist, a great violinist. You don't grow them overnight. It doesn't just happen. No. It starts like in the school that you just talked about. And that's an educational generation. Something I talked to Adam about, actually, and Elaine and Paul, who, you know, of course, are behind this amazing building, is stuff doesn't happen quickly. You know, I think we did a piece for the BBC and they said, well, how long will it take this difference to happen? And we all said, well, it'll take an educational generation at least. Yeah. You know, because if you need to give people skills and tool them up and educate them, that's how long it takes. Yeah. You know, not 5 years of a parliament. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. Yeah, we all had to have, everybody played the recorder. How were you?
Hey?
Were you any good on the recorder?
I was good. I was great on the recorder. I was, honestly, I loved music. We all had to play it, but you played it like after
Could you play Mr. Brightside on the recorder?
I would be able to. You brought me on now. I could do it, I'm sure.
I'll see what we've got in the office.
And do you think, what was I now? So how would you say the Camerata has helped to build this city?
It's a really good question, actually, because that's what we should be doing. If we want music for change, and that's making a change in this city and changing the city region, which it is, I think there's a few beacon things that probably I'd say actually that is helping to build the reputation of this city. Undoubtedly, our move here with the different activities, particularly the music cafe, and that rich history of research and music and dementia, that's one thing. I think Hacienda Classical has done something unusual that has helped reflect the city, perhaps in a different way, to a much, much bigger international community than we would otherwise, or perhaps that the Hacienda could as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's the other thing. So that's a very Mancunian brand. And I think it's also through our programming, there's a lot of silent small steps that happen that get towards going, da-da, we've made a change and we've helped build the city. Well, there was a composer we worked with when he was a student at the RNCM, Danny Cadane, and he's since been commissioned by the Proms, etc. But it was a really special moment, almost 10 years to the day, that during COVID we commissioned him to write a piece called Be Still, which is extraordinary. And I guess at that point we did sit back and go, that's great, that's a real journey from supporting him, as a student with his first commission and now being here doing this. So I guess those are three ways that, we help build the city. We don't do it alone, do we?
No.
Also I'm really conscious we're in a building where quite literally Elaine and Paul did save this extraordinary building. They built, literally physically built some of the city.
Yeah, I want them on the podcast too.
You must have them.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure,
Put a word
for
in
sure.
for me.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I'm going to do a quick fire now, Manchester quick fire. So describe Manchester as a symphony. What qualities would it have and which instruments would be most prominent?
Fast, loud, violin and trumpet.
Love it.
There you go.
And we also know that collaboration is at the heart of the Camerata. So which Mancunian artist or musician would you most like to collaborate with that you've not already?
The one that we haven't yet found. I think, as I said, like, we're looking forwards.
Yeah.
So, and there's going to be a kind of special 50th celebratory open call for composers. And so I've got to say it's one that we haven't yet found.
I love that. That's so exciting. I've got to ask you, what do you order at the Chippy?
Cheese and onion pie, beans and chips.
Love a cheese and onion pie. No gravy. You've got the gravy
like school.
and beans.
That's at school dinners, cheese and onion pie and
from
chips
school,
and beans.
it was so good.
It was all horrible, but so good. Oh, so bad, so good.
And where in Manchester would you go to get your inspiration from?
It's got to be this place, really. You just walk through the door and something happens. So here. Yeah.
So beautiful. When we walked in and they had almost the steps of light that was coming through. It was quite amazing. And what sound for you sums up Manchester?
An ex-girlfriend reversing her old Skoda at about 80 miles an hour down Dorset Avenue, the police helicopter, and probably the clink of a milk bottle. Those would be the three things.
That's its own symphony, isn't it?
Oh, God, yeah.
And just lastly, I just want to ask you about legacy, and we've touched on it, and it's clear that everything you do on a daily basis is creating legacy for Manchester and the communities around us. But how would you want, once you finish as CEO of the Camerata, what would you want people to say that you'd achieved?
I think that I'd enabled others. I really do think it would be that, enabling particularly the creative spirit of the musicians that we work with.
Lovely. Well, thank you. And thank you so much for joining me on We Built This City.
Pleasure.
And it's amazing to see how the Camerata really embodies what Manchester's all about. And you've been through tough times, but amazing times ahead now. And I would just say that if anyone's listening to this podcast that's not been in Castlefield Bowl for Hacienda Classical, you're not a Manc. You've not lived. And I think it's the 8th of July this year, isn't it?
There.
So make sure you get back, because it's a life-changing experience and you'll make new friends. So thanks so much.
It's a
and
pleasure.
good luck
Thank
with everything
you.
that's coming with the anniversary year.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Lisa. Thank you.